Now, the traditional rite of passage into manhood, or ulwaluko, has once again been marred by the alarming deaths of initiates this year. And this morning, we are reporting that 23 initiates, I think that number's gone up to 25, have been taken to hospital after the Traditional Affairs Department and police rescued them from an illegal school at Sedibeng in Gauteng. And this, as in the Eastern Cape, the number of young people who have lost their lives this summer initiation season has risen to 25. And this is already more than last year when 17 initiates died in the province. And over the years, various dialogues among stakeholders have been held to try and seek solutions. But who is talking to young boys who are most affected by this? So let's have a chat with the Department of Social Development's Head of Communications, Lumka Oliphant. Thanks so much for coming through.
Thank you for having us, Sakina.
You know, this is a very sad situation, Lumka, because I think I read yesterday somewhere that since 1995, we've seen more than 1,000 deaths of initiates. And that is a staggering number of people who are cut down in the prime of their lives. And we're not even talking about those who have been scarred for life, those who have had their manhood amputated as a result of this and living with those scars. But as the Department of Social Development, what have your reflections been around this?
Sakina, firstly, we have the Children's Act that is the custodian of all children, where issues of circumcision and ukutwala and traditional practices are catered for and speak to how they should be done. Let's start with the law first. That says the children should be protected, and it says from 16 years old, a child can be circumcised, and consent must be given by the child, and children can refuse not to be circumcised. But coming to who is talking to boys, we have been talking to boys, and recently we were in Lusikisiki, and the young boy that is coming up now is having a different conversation to what the adults are having. One of the things that they're talking about is that we are not vocal enough as a society when it comes to boys owning their bodies. Whereas we are talking to girls a lot. Girls can terminate a pregnancy if they want to. Girls can get a contraception, but we are not as vigor as we're supposed to be. That's what the boys are saying. Secondly, they are saying they want their mothers to be involved because the South African family has evolved. There are children who are looking after themselves, and the majority of families is headed by women. And they are saying that we don't have any fathers, and it would make them feel better if the mother is not cut off completely in the process, not just what she is given now. They want their mothers to take care of them when they are there. They are also saying destigmatize medical circumcision because it is there, it is a right, but when it comes to communities, you are shunned and not be seen as a man. What was also interesting was that they were saying the boys who go to circumcision and have to come back to school, it brings a problem in the schooling system because we only have boys and girls in school. We don't have men and women. And the older boys who have gone through initiation, they wouldn't want to share, for instance, bathrooms with the ones that are supposedly not have gone. So the narrative amongst young people is completely different, and they are saying they want to own and make the decisions on themselves.
That is so interesting. But then how does their voice find expression within the cultural prescripts that prevail?
That's why we are there as the Department of Social Development, because we do dialogues with boys. We have boys' assemblies where they are able to speak in a safe space. We also have the Children's Parliament. The Children's Parliament is another vehicle where the children actually are doing the right way, taking the right routes, because they will go to the AU eventually, they'll go to the UN eventually, and also we may be talking about it in the country on how the voices of the children are catered for as we are moving forward with this subject.
But what about the cultural elders?
The cultural, yes, the cultural, yes, they are, because we are, although it is a shocker, we are We have relationships with traditional leaders. We have been making even headway with the issues of Ukutwala, because we can't go to communities and try to bring policy and try to change laws without making sure that we speak to traditional leadership. We have that relationship as a Department of Social Development. I was in Lusikisiki, and those kids were talking whilst the elders were there. So it's gonna take time, but I'm thinking that it is going to be the young boy who is up and coming, who is wanting to take back his rights and making decisions, who's going to change the future of Ukwaluka.
And one of the things is, of course, the exclusion of women. And I think you rightly say that the family unit in South Africa particularly has evolved, and many families are female-headed. So what are the traditional leaders saying in this regard?
You know, Sakina, when we do dialogues with the children, we first have to listen and then take back to the elders what they are saying. We have not actually made headway because they feel that there are things that women can do and women can't do. But the children are saying, we don't want our mothers not to be mothers because we are there. We want the mother to be there because we are able to cry, we are able to be vulnerable to our mothers. So it's a constant conversation. But yesterday I was also looking at the bill that has been going through Parliament. There is a section there from the House of Traditional Leaders on women. And they clearly say themselves that you don't stop being a mother when your child is there. So we must find ways of making sure that we weave in and also the element of the demand for women to look after their children. Where that will take us is another story for another day.
Something interesting you said at the start of our discussion. You spoke about the Child Act and how children from the age of 16 have to and can give consent for undergoing initiation. What about children younger than 16?
Children, and also, Sakina, the children also saw the gaps in the law, and they are wanting us to harmonize the laws, because you find that in other provinces they say 18 and the Children's Act speaks about 16, and the ones that are younger than 16, you can't circumcise them unless for religious purposes and also with a parent, because other religions want their children to be circumcised earlier. So the Act does provide for that, but it must be consented or also for religious purposes.
And this morning we're running a story in the news here in Gauteng, in Sedibeng, about boys who were abducted. And again, it's not a new story. We hear this every initiation season. But what happens in those instances where the law is crystal clear in terms of the Act, whereby you cannot do this against the child, against their consent, parental consent as well? Are we seeing enough being done to actually clamp down on perpetrators of what is essentially a crime against children?
In other areas, Sakina, we are seeing that people are being arrested. Whether the convictions are, how the conviction rate is going on is also another story for another debate. But it is criminal to abduct children for circumcision. And also children spoke about that, and they were saying that the pressures that and the commercialization of the initiation process is something that needs to be lifted up. And they were saying to us that the campaigns must intensify. The campaigns must not just only be about girls. The campaigns must also be about boys and what they go through. What was most interesting for me is that the taking back, the demand to take back their right to own their bodies, and saying that parents can't just decide for us. We also want to have a say, because this is provided for in the Children's Act. It says written consent, by the way, but when things happen, there are gaps where children have to go, and also the family unit involvement in it and its importance, which is why then we are also having these discussions that are also centered around the kind of a family that we are in South Africa.
And brings us back to child-headed families, for example, where there are no parents involved. And what sort of support can government provide, and the role that government can play in that regard?
The submissions that we made to the bill was that we understand the economic the situation of the children, number one. Number two, we understand that the children as well have the pressure, you know, in communities. Therefore, the issue of nutrition, the issue of the department providing psychosocial services, the issue of bringing in counselors and traditional leadership so that these children are identified. Some of them, the families do push for them to go to initiation, but they don't even have the means. So what do we do as the Department of Social Development, making sure that food is provided for, health is provided for, and so this needs a multi-sectorial approach so that every child who goes into initiation is accounted for.
And just a final question with regard to support once again, for those who have been to initiation school, who perhaps have seen other initiates die, who perhaps have lost their own manhood in the process, what sort of support does the department provide?
That again was an issue that they were saying we are not talking about. We only talk about those who don't survive. But there are a lot of young men who are out there who are suffering in silence and who can't have normal relationships because they have lost their manhood. Their psychosocial services are happening. I also was having a chat while we were in the Eastern Cape in Lusikisiki. This guy was telling us that they also have a pilot project that is happening around Lusikisiki and Bizana, where they are making sure that those who are amputated or lost their manhood get those psychosocial services. So and they were also saying that we should lift up when we are talking about that, not just about the deaths, but about the ones who are now faced with trying to have families, trying to have relationships, and also be integrated in communities.
Well, thank you so much for stopping by. Department of Social Development's Head of Communications, Lumka Oliphant, talking about a very, very serious situation around initiates and what goes on during that process, and also the department's interventions. We're going to take a break and then we'll bring you the latest news.